On GMT, 3 o'clock in the morning in Egypt. I'm Dareen Abu Gaida. The main developments. Fighting over Egypt's future, hundreds hurt in pitched battles between supporters and opponents of President Hosni Mubarak. Government supporters attempt to break the anti-Mubarak occupation of Liberation Square, but the mass protest is still there. Meanwhile, troops hold their strategic positions but fail to act. Hours later, the military urge people to get off the streets. So after days of largely peaceful protests in Egypt, the tone has changed dramatically. After a day of fierce battles around the edges of Tahrir Square, that's Liberation Square, there are still flames rising as petrol bombs fly across makeshift barricades. The health ministry is reporting that 3 people have died and more than 1,500 injured as the president's backers attacked the protesters in the square. Our teams on the ground saw men destroying buildings and pavements and using the debris as missiles. We can now speak to one of our correspondents in Cairo for an update on the situation right now. So tell us where you are, what you're seeing.
Well, I'm a couple of hundred meters away from where the front line, really, where the two opposing sides have been in a standoff now for the past couple of hours. It's 3 o'clock in the morning here, and I have to say the energy levels, the anti-government protesters have been banging on their steel barriers for a couple of hours now in an effort to intimidate the pro-Mubarak opposition group, which is facing them standing on an overpass bridge. I've also just seen one of the pro-Mubarak protesters use a long stick to bash out the light that was lighting up the area underneath this flyover. That has now gone dark, and there's quite a few people, probably about 30 or 40, congregating there. This is on the ground opposite the barricades of the anti-government protesters. Really an endless supply of Molotov cocktails going on here, especially from the pro-Mubarak supporters. It's literally been a barrage on and off over the separate barricades. The problem that the anti-government protesters are facing is because the pro-Mubarak group is now on top of the flyover, they're finding it very difficult to actually have their petrol bombs reach up above the bridge. The pro-government pro-government supporters finding it much easier to lob their Molotov cocktails into the anti-government camp. Now, as soon as all the time we're seeing fires landing there, we see the anti-government protesters running, taking off their jackets and dousing the flames, putting them out. Also, about 10 minutes ago, the anti-government protesters set off fireworks close to where they are. Quite ironic, really, in the scenes that we're seeing, which is so sort of chaotic. And fireworks usually a form of celebration. Perhaps they feel a sense of victory. They have managed to push these pro-Mubarak supporters right to the end. There are far less of them than there were, but there's still probably a couple of hundred.
Okay, so it sounds like both camps, if I can say that, are trying to intimidate one another. Is there any sense that either is willing to back down at this point?
No, I mean, the numbers of the anti-government protesters far outnumber the Mubarak supporters. The Mubarak supporters earlier in the day, of course, we saw many of them. There's not as many of them left at this point in time, 3 o'clock in the morning, but I can say that there's probably a couple of hundred. They're being very effective. They have an endless barrage of Molotov cocktails that they are throwing into the anti-government camp. Really, at this point in time, I see no sign of this standoff backing down.
How have these pro-Mubarak supporters, how have they managed to organize themselves? Because it does sound like, from what you're telling us and other reporters on the ground and guests as well that we've spoken to on Al Jazeera, that they seem to be very organized.
Yes, they seem to be extremely organized. They started arriving here early afternoon in groups. Throughout the day, they really had an agenda. The funny thing is they really turned this. These protests have been very peaceful, without counting last Friday, of course, up until now. When they arrived on the scene today, it became tense. There were clashes Also, concerning the media, they were very violent against the media. Anyone who looked like a foreigner who had a camera was targeted, physically beaten, cameras taken away from them. We also saw a couple of journalists frog marched into our hotel with a huge crowd behind them. When they arrived, the hotel raced to barricade up the doors, afraid that the crowd would storm the place where we're staying. That, of course, that did not happen. But just to give you a sense of the aggression of this crowd, and it just seems to be ongoing still as I'm speaking to you. Molotov cocktails being lobbed into the anti-government camp.
And is there no sense of any authority, any military presence or police presence that are trying to put an end to these clashes that you're telling us about?
No, I mean, there haven't been police on the streets for a good couple of days now. There was some traffic police appeared yesterday. They weren't that well received. The police are really staying away because their relationship with the people is very, very bad. The military is here. They have tanks, but they simply retreated from the positions when there were clashes ongoing between the two camps. They're doing absolutely nothing. I don't even think at this point in time it's about taking sides. It's simply about them trying to restore order, but even that is not happening at all. The military did say earlier in the day for people to go home that their message has been heard by the president, and their message seemed to be that enough is enough, but that's not being heeded, and they seem to be taking a step back and are doing absolutely nothing to try and restore the chaos. Really, the scenes that we're seeing, they're quite unbelievable.
And of course, these pro-democracy protesters doesn't sound like they're backing down. We hear reports of a mass rally being organized for Friday.
Yes, we're hearing that too. Everyone we've spoken to has said that they have absolutely no intention of backing down. Their message is clear. They want the president to stand down. They don't want to wait 8 months until he decides not to run for the presidency. They don't trust him. So they are now saying that they believe they're going to rally another huge protest on Friday. Now, last Friday, of course, there were very violent clashes here between protesters and police. The police now not on the streets, but now the problem is the two camps, pro-government, anti-government, that are really in a standoff all on their own. There is absolutely no law and order here. It's each man for their own, and that's it.
We heard reports that more than 1,500 people have been wounded, and that's just in Wednesday's clashes, and 3 people are dead. Are you seeing any more injuries, and who's been helping and evacuating the wounded?
Well, we know that in Tahrir Square, that's Liberation Square, there is a bunch of doctors and sort of medical people who volunteer to help out the injured. They've become quite well organized so that they've got that supply. There's been ambulances on the scene, although I have to say there are that gunfire, I believe, that's being fired into the air. Not quite clear who's doing that, but there have been ambulances on the scene throughout the night, on and off, but I haven't seen any of them in the last hour and a half or so. Wounded, yes. We're also seeing when these Molotov cocktails, when they're being lobbed into the anti-government camp. There's been a couple of people I've seen who've caught fire. There have been incidents when from here I'm told they've been rolling around on the ground or doused out. I didn't catch any kind of thing that looked too serious, but it's a very, very hazy situation here. I mean, fires being lobbed over the barricades from back and forth, and they are landing amidst the people. So, I mean, it's inevitable that sooner or later someone is going to be affected by it.
And give us an idea or an estimate, if you may, about the size of the crowds that you're looking at right now. I mean, is the crowd growing, or is it dispersing? Are people leaving? Do they look like they're going to leave at any point of the night?
The anti-government camp who are behind this barricade, I would say, from what I can see, there's probably about 400 or 500 of them in this area. Then there's a second barricade behind them, and then I sort of my vantage point doesn't allow me to see how many are behind that. I can see the square, which is far more peaceful. There really are two very different scenarios playing out here. That square, things very, very different than what's playing out right here. And then if you look at the pro-Mubarak supporters, they are now all standing on this flyover, and there's a few underneath. A rough estimate, I would say, probably around 300 of them. Behind the flyover, there's another sort of bridge that joins it. People walking around quite relaxed. Walking back and forth. I mean, and then only about 50 meters from there, there's the front line of this. So really quite bizarre scenes here. But at the moment, I don't get the feeling. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. This is ongoing, and I think we have to remember that a lot of the anti-government protesters, a lot of them haven't slept. They've been in Tahrir Square for quite a few days now, and 3 o'clock in the morning, they're still going strong. And what they see is protecting the square, Liberation Square, their camp